Hello and welcome to Code Red. I'm Kasper Borg Nissen, Director of Developer Relations and Product Marketing at Sghiouar, and co-host of the Code Red podcast, where we explore platform engineering, observability, and the people shaping how modern software systems are built and operated. Today's episode is a little bit different. Rather than focusing on a specific technology or an area, we are taking a step back and looking at the cloud-native ecosystem itself. What is changing? What is gaining momentum? What are people actually talking about? And where is all of this heading? To help answer those questions, I'm joined by someone who probably have one of the best vantage points in the industry. Abdel Sghiouar is a senior cloud developer advocate at Google, co-host of the Kubernetes podcast, founder of the cloud native group Casablanca, and was recently announced as co-chair for KubeCon CloudNativeCon. Abdel, welcome to Code Red and congratulations on the co-chair role.
Thank you, Kasper. Hi, glad to be here.
Awesome. So before we dive into things, we have this traditional Code Red opener. What has been sort of your biggest Code Red moment? An outage, an incident, a career mistake, or like a hard lesson that basically fundamentally changed how you think about technology?
Yeah, I had to think hard about this one, right? So there was an interesting one that I had very early. So, my background actually started back in data centers. I was working in Morocco back in the data center, then I moved to Google to work in an actual data center. And there was this incident we had once, which is basically like the data center had four cooling units. Two of them were on maintenance mode. The other two, one of them was operating normally. And normally the cooling units, you can put them on this like auto, manual, or off. So off, it's off. Auto, basically, it will turn on and off automatically. And then manual, you have to go and physically press a button, right? So one was operating, the other one was on off or manual, and the two others were off because they were in maintenance. This was a Friday. The maintenance team left, EMEA time zone, and then somebody in the US woke up and then figured, oh, this data center is coming up. Let's just turn up some capacity. So started like pushing some configs and turning on some servers. And then I had to be called at 2 a.m. because I was on call to come back to the data center, try to figure out why the data center floor was like 48 degrees.
Oh,
And
that sounds
so
interesting.
yeah, and so this actually is a very interesting one because it's both a combination of, I mean, obviously the root cause is like miscommunication between teams, right? Like the people who were doing maintenance did not communicate that they left something in a certain state. The people who were waking up to do some stuff, they did not know that there was maintenance going on, and they did not know that there was a physical limitation of the cooling capacity of the actual data centers that shouldn't be turning on capacity. So that was interesting to look at from the perspective of like how miscommunication actually cause outages, right? And also how people not understanding what the other people are doing, like teams not understanding what the other teams are doing, also impacts or cause outages a lot of times, right? Because you're just, especially when you have teams distributed across multiple zones, it's just somebody waking up and go like, okay, I have my task list today, what do I do? Yeah, just turn up capacity. So it's one of these outages that definitely make me think like very hard about like before you do anything or before you make big changes, you have to check whether you're supposed to do it or not, right?
Yeah.
And it also makes me scary about the upcoming future with agents, where agents are like random and autonomous. Like, what does that mean for
Yeah.
us?
Yeah, I guess communication with agents is also like very important, like in this case, right? You really need to be clear about what it is that you wanted to do, and just in general be clear about communication. I think that is a really good advice. I think that's also a nice segue into sort of the next like topic that I wanted to pick up was really that I think both you and I have spent like some of our time in our careers like helping developers learn and adopt technology. I think communication is like a big part of that, right? You've been in developer relations for quite a while now, and but you as you mentioned, you didn't start there. Can you was this communication like incident that you're just like mentioning, was that part of the reason why that you went into developer advocacy, or how did you sort of end up in that role? Can you maybe go into a little bit more details about that?
Yeah, I mean, partially yes, because the I think I've always been a big fan of this thing of like like teaching others, right? Like scaling through others, right? And that's something that's have kind of like have been with me my entire career, where I would do like internal enablement sessions for people, or we would like organize a lunch and learn, a very common thing, which is you grab lunch, go to your meeting room, and then you hack together with your teammates or something like that, right? And I think the coming to DevRel was about like what 4 years ago. I was doing some talks before. I was like going to conferences. I was producing content, writing blogs, and it just like felt like a natural progression because like people who go to the tech industry through, let's say, the old school kind of traditional path of university and stuff, I think basically you all ended up with more or less the same technical skills. Some people are better than others, but one thing definitely you don't end up with is communication skills because we don't teach that stuff in universities, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, being somebody who's really good with the technical stuff but is able to communicate and to articulate your thoughts correctly is a skill that you learn over time and you kind of like tune over time, right? And that's definitely not something that everybody has, right? Engineers, generally speaking, have this like kind of assumption about them that they're like quiet and shy and they just don't want to be under the spotlight. They just want to write code and be left alone, right? So then when you have somebody who has the engineering background and the technical background but then is able to talk in front of an audience or do a podcast or something like that, that I think is actually quite rare. I don't think that that's very common. And that's for me is the two main skills you need to do an advocate, to be an advocate, right? You need to understand technology very well, but then also you need to be able to communicate very well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Do you see like have DevRel changed since you're like first entered what you said 4 years ago? Has it changed? Has there, especially now with AI, has yeah, do you see any changes in this role?
One interesting thing about DevRel is that DevRel means a lot of things to a lot of people, and its meaning is different from one company to another, right? What does the job an advocate is, it might be different from one company to another. But what's changing definitely, at least for me, is like AI is enabling us at least to maybe slightly be more productive in the things that I don't really like to do. Like I like to write content, I like to produce content, but I don't like to write the stuff like blog posts, like all the words in a blog post. That's like the tedious part.
Yeah.
Usually, I don't know if you have the same process, but for me, if I'm writing a blog post, I would start with the technical parts first, the
Yes.
implementation in a markdown file, and then you have to like put stuff around it. So that's stuff you have to put around this. I get the AI to generate it for me, right? And then I review it afterwards, right? So that's one of them. And now I was just talking to a colleague yesterday. We're actually together we're working on an agent that would allow us to make it easier to book travel, do like trip reports, do like expense reports, all these like tedious tasks that no one like the admin things.
Yeah,
So
exactly. That's a good way to use AI for all the tedious tasks. I have a similar flow in how I'm producing content as well. It's AI helps a lot in that sense, and I also always start with the sort of the technical part of the problem, and which is also what I find most interesting,
yes,
and learning about those new things, and then the communication part is something that you can like push to AI and have that.
exactly.
So so you mentioned communication as one of those skills and the deep technical background. Are there any other skills that developer advocates need that people often underestimate or like see?
Yeah, definitely there are other things. I think one of the most important things that developer advocates should have is what I call that empathy, and that's empathy toward people coming with their problems. Because a lot of times when you go to an event or a conference or something, from the perspective of the attendees, they see you as a representative of the company that you are wearing their logo. And if they come with their problems, I have seen people before where a user comes with a bug or a feature request or something, and then people push back on that by saying, oh no, our product is perfect, doesn't have bugs, or you're not using it correctly. I mean, that's the wrong approach, right? In my opinion,
Yes.
you have to have this kind of empathy to understand that like the stuff that you know, other people might not know, right? And also empathy to be able to kind of communicate and talk to people at different levels of proficiency, right? You shouldn't always assume that everybody knows everything, and that even if when people are asking you a question, you are in the back of your head thinking, but like that's not how you're supposed to use this particular feature or product or tool or whatever. Instead of just saying it like that, you should probably kind of try to kind of scale down a little bit and go down a level to just explain to people or try to get them to come to their own conclusion themselves, right? And I see this some I have experienced this before when I was in group conversations where people doesn't have empathy, and you just end up with conversations where like two people are trying to prove that they are right, and that's not a productive way of talk of
No,
communicating, right?
no, that usually doesn't end in
it,
a good way.
it doesn't end a good way, exactly. So there is this, and then there is also another one is I think generally speaking people should, when you're in advocacy you use social media quite a lot. It's like one of the main tools you're going to be using, and with all the downsides of social media it has also upsides because it allows you to reach people. And one of the important things for me as a skill is that you need to be able to use social media to share useful information, not just opinions, right? Because a lot of people are leveraging it just to share opinions, which everybody has opinions, so no one cares really.
Exactly.
So ask yourself before you start posting things, is this going to be useful to the world? Am I teaching people something? Or is it just like, you know, and if you use it for opinions, that's completely fine. It just like they have to be mindful about this, right?
Yeah, but I agree, and I think that it also pushes the ecosystem. because you probably like talk to like a lot of people when you are like attend a conference or like stand at a booth somewhere. You get a lot of perspectives, and those perspectives could potentially get lost if you're not relaying them or you're amplifying them. So it's also a way for to basically share all of these ideas that are in the ecosystem, right, with the entire community instead of the community that is only attending this particular event. At least
Exactly.
that is my opinion, and that's also how I try to use it to really amplify the good ideas that are out there that might be lost.
There's two more things that actually we do as a team that I don't know if other DevRel teams do it. In my team, we have two things we do. We do friction logs. We basically actually test the products and then we write detailed logs about what we did and what we're trying to achieve. And we share them with the engineering team. That allows the engineering team to see how their products are performing from the perspective of a user, right? So that's one thing. And then the second thing we do quite that I think that's essentially the kind of this like two-way communication where you're communicating from the engineering team to the world, but also you're taking feedback from people back to the engineering team. And then the second thing is we do something called customer empathy sessions. That's where we bring software engineers from Google, we put them in a room, we give them a use case, and we ask them to implement it using the tool they're building. And it's
Okay,
actually quite
interesting.
funny. Yeah, it's quite funny because if people are working on a very large products, they usually work on very specific features and they very rarely get to experience it end to end. So when you put them in
Mm.
front of a laptop with a use case that's an external user might want to test, then you see when they realize when their things break.
See the friction points.
Exactly.
Interesting. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah,
Cool.
we do that quite a lot. Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit because a few months ago it was announced that you will be stepping into the role of KubeCon CloudNativeCon coach as a co-chair.
Mhm.
So first of all, congratulations with that.
Thank you.
It's a great experience. I know that myself. I've co-chaired Paris, Salt Lake City, and London, and it's also a significant responsibility. So, what was your sort of initial reaction when you got that message in the inbox?
Yeah, I mean, obviously happy and honored. It's not something that a lot of people get to do. It's something that very few people will get to experience. I've been in program committees of other conferences before. I've been the chair of DevOps Morocco, which is a much smaller conference over the last 3 years. But this is like the scale of KubeCon is completely different. Like DevOps Morocco, we get maybe 400 submissions. The KubeCon Salt Lake City, which is coming this year, we just closed the CFP about 3 weeks ago, something like that. 2 weeks ago, and I think we're at 2,500 submissions or something, which is like insane,
It's
right?
crazy. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's crazy. And a lot of the submissions are in the AI and agentic track, and then in the observability track and platform engineering track. Those are like the biggest tracks by definition, but like by far. So it's an interesting role to step into. I am happy that I get to do it with people who have been doing it before. I have my other co-chairs Lynn and Abby, and they come with very long experience actually doing this. So I'm actually learning from them. Also, like we brought new ideas, so I brought some new ideas, and we're like implementing changes like slowly. I am a data nerd, so we're doing everything using existing data, or if we don't have the data, we're like setting ourselves up to collect it, in the next iterations because we want to make decisions that make sense, right? So the work is very different than anything else that I have done before, right? The process to get the agenda built is quite long. It takes a lot of time. There's multiple layers of reviews. You know this. So yeah, it's an interesting one. The funny part is that since it was announced in March, I think that the wave of work haven't hit us yet because we are like
No,
right now it's
yeah, you're going to like read through all the proposals, I guess, very soon after. Like, so if for those listening that doesn't know the process, there's like a full program committee, then there's track chairs, and then you as co-chairs get to like like basically build the final agenda, right?
correct.
And selecting from what you mentioned, like 2,500 different call for papers, and creating that and curating that agenda is a lot of work.
Exactly. And we're
But
still getting to it in July probably. So we'll see.
so your summer is all gone.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
But what responsibilities? I know you're still very new to this role, but what responsibilities do you see this role also have that people may not see or may not like know about this role? Because I think many people are seeing this role as you being up on the big stage, that is you that are introducing the next speaker on stage, and then you have a keynote. But from my perspective, at least, this role does like there's a lot more responsibility in this role than that. But how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to DevRel, people see DevRel as you being on stage, but they don't see the emergent parts of the iceberg, like the part that like all the work leading up to that. So far, we've been through the phase of actually selecting the program committee and the track chairs. So that have been quite some work over like a period of a week. So For those of you who doesn't know, the way we select the program committee and the track chairs is via form that gets sent to the ecosystem. So that's like all the CNCF ambassadors and a bunch of other people, the community people, the maintainers, etc. They will all receive a form to express interest to join the program committee or to join the track chairs. And then we go and review every single one. I think we had something like 200 applications that we had to go through, 200 people that we have to like pick from. And then we picked all the program chairs, the program committee members for each track, the track chairs for each track. That's the thing that we've done. And now we are waiting for, it's basically 2 weeks for program committee reviews, another 2 weeks for track chairs reviews, and then it gets to us. And that's the busy period. And it's a lot of things. Like one thing I realized very quickly is I stepped into the first meeting we were supposed to do the program committee reviews without preparing. And that was a humiliating experience, a humiliating and learning experience, because like I should have set some before to prepare before I step into a meeting to talk to the other co-chairs. And so that taught me that actually when we get to the point where we need to do reviews ourselves, you need to block times and calendar to actually go and sit down and read through the reviews, right? So yeah, that's where I'm learning so far. And since we haven't got to the reviews yet, I don't know how the reviews will look like. So if you'd ask me in a month from now, my answer might be different.
Yeah. but as you mentioned, you've done programs, yeah, like a bunch of times before I think also for KubeCon, but also for other conferences. What in your opinion, if any of the listeners like wanna, not for KubeCon in Salt Lake City coming up, but maybe for Europe next year, what makes a good conference talk stand out to you today?
So I think that there is this like general rule I follow myself also when I'm submitting, is that the submission, if your submission follows a very simple structure, which is problem statement, solution, takeaway. So is the problem you're gonna cover, what the solution to that problem is, and what do you think the takeaway from your session will be? Usually those are simple to process, simple to read, and then simple to either pick or not pick. That's one. The second one, which I think a lot of people miss all the time, is that you have to know the audience. You can just submit a random talk to a random conference without really knowing what the conference is about, right? And the way you do that is you go look at the program for the previous years, you look at the website. A lot of times, actually, conferences will have a submission guide about things they want, things they don't want. Like the CNCF, for example, all conferences should not have vendor stuff, vendor pitch, vendor products, blah, 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 all these things, right? So that's also very important. And I think just basically like a lot of times that a mistake that I see people doing is that they will try to overcomplicate the submission or make the submission look or sound more complicated than it needs to be. You need to be aware that when you go to conferences like KubeCon, and KubeCon is probably the outlier, but like conferences like KubeCon, the attendees are coming from all levels. So all the way from 101 all the way to 401, from like beginner to experts. And so there is actually space for you to make submissions that can cover at every level, right? So never think of whatever the topic you have in mind, never think that this is too simple or too complex, because there will be, if you think it's a good topic, you can be sure that there is people that will want to listen to it, right?
Definitely.
So yeah, so this would be my advice. And definitely do not just generate a random submission with AI and submit it, because that's like the worst.
Do you think in general the sort of the, I think the topics has definitely changed a lot with sort of the emergence of AI, but has the community changed since AI came as well, or how do you see that?
Well, I mean, I think Kubernetes itself, Kubernetes within the cloud native ecosystem is the biggest project, right? I think Kubernetes itself is changing quite a bit, right? Like now there is quite a lot of work on AI specific features. If you look at the release note for every single version that comes out, and through the podcast that I do, we get to interview the release leads. So the last couple of versions, every single version, like the new APIs that are introduced, has to do something with AI. DRA, device plugin, all these APIs. So that's definitely, the project itself is changing in that sense, and I think that also kind of gets reflected into the community. KubeCon is a little bit of an odd one, because the thing with KubeCon is that every single year when there is a report coming, 50% of the people did it the first time, right? So we tend to think about it as, when you go to KubeCon and I meet you, I'm just like, oh, this is just the same old conference. I'm meeting some friends and that's it. No, 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 no. It's actually
Yeah.
more than half of the people, that's the first time coming to KubeCon. So
It's always interesting to get those stats and reports. It always like amazes me that it's still possible to have like like over 50% new like first time joiners of the conference. It's interesting.
exactly. And so that's, you have to keep that in mind also, that not everybody coming to the conference will be familiar with everything that you know, working for whatever product you work on. So you have to keep that in mind when you're talking with people, when you're interacting, when you're doing your talk, etc., that like you need to kind of be able to cover, as I said, like all these levels of introductory all the way to expert, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit because I think basically you have like a perfect vantage point because you are like hosting a podcast. You are now co-chair of KubeCon. You travel all over the world for conferences, and you work at Google. So I guess you have probably one of the best positions in the industry to tell about what is actually going on from a more technical perspective. So what do you see is sort of the thing that people are talking about right now?
Yeah, and there is couple of topics, right? Uh, I mean, I think one of the major ones that I am seeing over the last couple of years, just based on my own talks that get accepted to conferences, but also conversations I'm having with people, we are getting to a point now where AI token cost is getting too high. It's insanely expensive. Unless you are Google or AWS, I think every single company doing AI today is losing money on the token cost because it costs them more money than like no matter how much subscription they charge for, it's not going to be enough.
Yes.
Inference is extremely expensive. So there is a shift now toward actually people companies releasing open weight models that are smaller that you can run locally, and then also the cloud native community talking about how do you optimize your platforms to be able to run your own large language models, right? And also there is another realization that we are doing that you don't actually need a massive model to do specific tasks. A lot of times you can just get away with like very small models, very efficient models that doesn't cost a lot of money to run, right? That's one. There is this whole topic now of agentic AI, which is no one knows what's going on. Like, I can point you to an article I wrote for the platform engineering team, a blog about like Kubernetes for agentic AI, and to my knowledge, that's probably was the first article to touch on this topic on like where does Kubernetes plays in the whole concept of agentic AI, like because agents are just apps, and you need to deploy these apps somehow, right? And we need to observe them and secure them, blah blah. So, but they are very particular apps with very particular kind of demands and needs, and we need to make sure that we know what these demands and needs are. I think the other one, which probably you have more insights than me, I'm not seeing platform engineering is a big deal now. It's a very important topic. There is like entire conferences and communities just talking about this particular topic.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I was in the industry long enough to see the shift from system admins and this like virtual wall that DevOps tried to remove.
Yeah.
And then now, as we're moving to platform engineering, we're just like flipping that wall upside down, essentially. Like sort of doing the same thing of like the platform engineers are the new sysadmins, essentially. And then
Yeah, but the
so
API is different, right?
yeah, well, it's true. That's true. So it's not Bash script anymore. It's Terraform. So, which probably there is some Bash script somewhere, but we don't talk about these things.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like the shift happening in the industry caused by AI is very interesting because it touches on a lot of spaces. It's not only software, it's not only cloud, it's not only cloud native or platform. It's across the board, everywhere. Everybody is impacted somehow by this. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I was one of the topics that I find really interesting these days is platform engineering. So it's interesting that you're mentioning it because I think platform engineering engineers right now are like being asked a lot of things right now. Now you need to like make sure that every developer that needs to, I don't know, be able to do something with AI can run the model, but running a model somewhere or like doing inference somewhere, you also need like identity, you need guardrails, you need all kinds of things that is usually what like platform engineers are doing out there. It's a similar thing. They probably have all the tools in place to be able to do all of these things with like OPA or whatever they have for policies, or they might have GitOps for applying things into the cluster. So they have all of this, but there's just like a ton of workload being pushed into the platform right now to make this as easy as possible to run and secure and observable.
yes.
So it's an interesting space. But then another question, because that's just one thing, right? Like running these models or agents or whatever we have. But now I think the agents is also like entering into the platform itself, right? That now we have agents doing what SREs maybe are doing. Do you have any insights or perspective on that?
I've seen quite a lot of projects now popping up with this agentic harness. It's like a big topic now that how do you actually make sure that the agent has access to all the tools it needs and specifically have access to a set of rules it has to adhere to. So how do you kind of control what the agents can do? But also like making agents part of platforms where instead of having a human being debug through logs and metrics, then you have an agent reading those and for me, ideally present the results to a human that has to do the final decision, right? We don't
Yes.
want like just agents doing random things and changing YAML files, right? But I think that one common trend I am noticing now is that there seem to be no agreed upon pattern across all of this, right? Like the patterns are being built as we are using these tools. When we talk about the topic of agentic AI, whether we're talking about, making agents part of your cloud native stack or running agents on top of Kubernetes, people are always asking about best practices, right? Like that's the most common question that you get. And when you look around, you just find best practices built by vendors, which does not necessarily always apply across the board because they're like specific to their platform. So it's an emerging topic, and I'm looking forward to see what comes up of it. Like I think the interesting thing about all of this is that as an industry, we have been really reactive, very good at reacting to standardization through protocols, right? Like we new thing pop up, we build a protocol for it, we create a spec, and then MCP A to A, blah blah blah, right? But like we are poorly, or we're not very good at building the practices upfront, and that's probably by design because we don't know how things will run. But it creates this like interesting chicken and egg problem, because people, when they get introduced to a new technology, they want best practices to know how to learn it. But if we can't build the best practices until we run that technology for a while and learn from it, like where do we get this from? It's interesting to observe the space as it's like kind of evolves, right?
Yeah, it kind of feels like that we are like paving the path as we go, right? So we just put one rail at a time, and we move one step. So we don't really like look at the bigger picture and understanding, yeah, basically the best practices and can communicate them. I think that's a really good perspective to basically, yeah, talk about and show the audience that yeah, this thing moves so fast right now that it's impossible to basically keep up understanding the entire space. How do you see then this like moving forward? What is going to happen? I don't want to like say years, but what is going to happen within the next half year, maybe it's 6 months? How do you see sort of the ecosystem evolve over the next 6 months?
Yeah, there are a few things that I'm keeping an eye on. There is supposed to be a new version of the MCP spec dropping very soon. MCP as a protocol lacks, in my opinion, the protocol spec itself lacks some very fundamental basic things around authentication authorization specifically. So, like building or running MCP servers is very easy. It's just a proxy running somewhere, right? But like, how do you authenticate? How do you authorize? How do you make agents authenticate toward the agents and users authenticate toward the MCP server is like kind of like a big open question. And if you look at the MCP spec itself, it says like, well, just go do OAuth 2. And there are companies kind of building solutions for them, building gateways and things like that. But the spec itself doesn't have those implementations, those details. And the new version coming in the summer is supposed to have some of this stuff, plus a few other features that were missing, like durable execution, long sessions, blah blah blah. That's one of them. The second thing is this whole thing of agents harness, right? Like the practice or the engineering practice of putting agents together with the tools and the markdown files they need and all this stuff to be able to function properly. And also one other thing which is very important, like so far, specifically coding agents, most people are just running them locally, and there seem to be no common way for people to just take this stuff and push it to the cloud and run it autonomously in the cloud. So you don't have to. Yeah, I think you've seen this meme on the internet where people keep the laptop open and then they take a picture and they're like, "Yeah, my agent is running. I can't close my laptop." Right? So
Yes.
so offloading agents to run somewhere else is also this like thing that is kind of where we're figuring it out. We're figuring it out. I suspect there are 2 3 companies that are well positioned, I think, in this space to come up with something. Docker will be definitely one of them, because they are already within the developer ecosystem and they're on every developer laptop. So they probably best positioned to come up with some sort of solution for agentic AI for coding. And then I think that the whole topic of security in general, security and observability, clearly, I mean, that's your field. Observability is a big one, right? So like the way I describe these agents is I always say like agents have multiple interaction surfaces. Because an agent talks to a large language model, then it has tools, then it talks to users. So how do you actually observe all of this and keep context across like one single call and exactly from one single prompt what happened at every single layer, at every single interaction surface, right? So all of these things are kind of evolving as we are moving forward, as we said earlier. So these are the things that I think in the next 6 months, probably to 1 year, there will be something coming up, some sort of open source project that try to kind of addresses each of these needs.
So what you're foreseeing is that we will have like coding, like basically factories, or at some point where basically people are, I don't know, defining requirements and submitting them to this thing in the cloud that are now building their code for them instead of running and building that locally?
Well, I mean, that's already exists. Lovable that's Lovable, and
Yeah,
Replit, right? That's what these two platforms are doing, right?
but is this going to be sort of the way that we are like working in the future, that we don't have all of this local anymore? We just like we don't have Cloud Code or whatever we have locally on our machines to like do the coding agents that exist today. That will all be pushed into a data center somewhere where we are basically just defining the requirements and managing these agents.
I think it will be probably the future looks like there will be a hybrid version of this where you would have the option to offload the agent to the cloud for long running tasks. As you said, like imagine you write like a 1,000 line spec for an app that's not going to be built within 10 minutes. It's going to take like ages to build. So you do these like long running tasks in the cloud, but you still have your agent locally for the kind of small short bug fixes or modifications. So that's definitely something that we're going to see at some point, that like a version where we have this hybrid setup. Clearly the future looks like coding will become just prompts, right? Like it's not going to be writing code anymore. So you prompt something, you get the results out, and then you look at it, validate it, vet it as a user or as a developer, and then modify it or accept it and then move on, right? So that's definitely, I think that's gonna happen. That's happening within the next
That's
like
happening right
6 months. Yeah, exactly. And there is another actually one interesting thing. I was last week. We were in Stockholm. We had like the Google Cloud Summit. There was like a bunch of customers coming. We're talking and chatting with them. And I had a couple of conversations with a couple of companies in Norway and in Denmark actually that were working on. So since agents are making code as a commodity and kind of lowering the barrier for access, now companies or organizations are actually faced with a different set of problems, which is how do we give the non-technical people within our teams access to vibe code applications but still put guardrails on that, right? So how do we, like a very simple question that I had last week, which is like, I want to be able to give my marketing team a platform where they can vibe code on, and then they can deploy the application and then expose it on a link that is only accessible to the rest of the company, right?
now.
So as a developer, then you just immediately think like authorization, authentication, blah blah blah. But like a marketing person wouldn't understand that. So how do you
To do that.
exactly? And it essentially boils down to platform engineering. Like, so how do you push the complexity down the platform and then expose a simple interface that people can use? So it seems to be, again, back to the conversation of lack of patterns. Because there are no patterns today, everybody's kind of building custom solutions.
Yes. Yeah, I've done this myself, just using GitHub Pages and the private kind of like OAuth, but then it sort of requires that everybody in the company is a GitHub user, and they're not, which is also an interesting problem, right? So
Yeah.
it's an interesting new world that we are like working in and living in these days. So to wrap up, what excites you the most with this that we're looking into right now?
I mean, definitely seeing the few, like, seeing the cloud native ecosystem move toward like releasing open source tools, projects, solutions, and design patterns for doing agentic AI in general. It doesn't matter whether like it's hosting or building with AI or whatever, but like kind of follow, like keeping up with that and then releasing solutions that will solve these problems is a very exciting thing. And I think another one is basically just the getting to the point where people will fall back from, instead of using a cloud hosted large language model, just using their own open weight models and then running them themselves, tuning them, fine tuning, customizing them, etc. That's also a very interesting future. The interesting thing about all of this is the following: it doesn't matter what the use cases are, it always boils down to the same engineering practices, right? So from my perspective, if you've been in the industry for long enough or for a certain amount of time and you have built those engineering practices over the time, it's a non-perishable skill set, because like the skills to run stuff in production is the same. It doesn't matter whether it's agents or not agents. It's just like now we're in the space of figuring out how to do it. But and I think also it comes down probably to that, because this is all new, there is also a little bit of communication problem between within organizations, between the business side and the tech side, because everybody wants something out of this, but no one knows how to communicate it to the others. So
Yeah, so now we are back to the original problem that you stated in the beginning of this podcast, right? Is that communication is actually really really hard.
exactly. Like communicate, like somebody reading something on a tech publication, and a non like a CXO, like let's say CEO reading something somewhere and then communicating to their CTO, I want this. But since none of them knows what's going on, like they how are you even gonna formulate
Yeah.
those requirements, right?
So then maybe the opposite question is like, what worries you the most with this, like the pace and that we're moving at right now?
Yeah, what one thing that worries me a lot is that I think it seems that people are more and more losing the interest and the curiosity that kind of people in the software industry have had for a very long time. And it's not because people are not losing it because they don't care anymore. It's just like the newcomers definitely see themselves in a future where everything can be done by AI. So why should I care? Why should I even learn how DNS works? This is a very like example I give all the time. And then those who have been in the industry for long enough either are getting burned out and getting overwhelmed or just not caring anymore and that can cause a lot of problems. That can cause security issues, that can cause cost issues, that can cause like quite a lot of issues. So like when I go to conferences, like when I'm not having technical conversations, a lot of time the other conversations that I'm having is about this. And what I'm noticing is that the level of not careness is kind of directly proportionate to the age of the person you're talking to. As in, the older they are, the more they seem to be of like I don't care anymore, right?
Yeah.
So I think probably the biggest thing that worries me is people losing interest in becoming curious or losing the curiosity, losing the sense of curiosity that drives you to actually learn new things, right?
Which is dangerous in this new world, right? Because if you're not like learning these technologies, especially now that the industry is like completely changing how we are developing software, right? Then if you're not jumping on that boat, it might be hard to get a job in, let's say, 2 to 3 years, or maybe even 6 months, right?
Pretty much, yeah. And it's not only that, it's also like organization over time are going to struggle with finding people, like because where do you find people who have 10 years of experience running stuff in production at the scale of Google, right? Like yeah, it's kind of like a worrying trend. We'll see, I think, what the future looks like, but hopefully there will be still enough people that will come to the tech industry from curiosity, and that will basically, like when I was 12 years old, take my house new TV that we just bought a week ago and just completely gut it out because I just want to learn how it works from inside, right?
Yes.
So I think we should. I think like if there is any solution that I can propose for this, I think that we should get to a point where once a week we should take people, put them in a room, and then cut internet out. So no access to AI, nothing, and just ask them to solve a problem. It doesn't matter what that problem is. Just give them a Lego set to build.
So I was just about to ask you what the biggest takeaway or your takeaway from this conversation should be, and it sounds like your takeaway is going to be like rip something apart and understand how it works. Is that more or less correctly?
Definitely, yeah, definitely, 100%. You're right, 100%. Like, take something, remove all the screws, take it out all the way, try to reassemble it, and make it work.
Abdel, thank you so much for joining me on Code Red. This was a fantastic conversation. For those listening, we'll include links in the episode description to Abdel's work, the Kubernetes podcast, and upcoming KubeCon events. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend or a colleague. And thanks again for tuning in. I'm Kasper Borg Nissen, and we'll see you in the next episode of Code Red.